wholeness comes from the inside out.
When we're living congruently with our values, there's happiness because there is that sense of wholeness.
Wholeness is when the way of your being matches the truth of your being.
In this episode, we are focusing on the Enneagram Type 7, the Enthusiast. So if you are a 7, or if you have a close relationship to a Type 7, listen up, because you will learn a little bit about yourself or how to support and engage with this person on a little bit deeper level. If you are the Type 7, get ready to understand a little bit more about yourself. There might be some discomfort as you move through this. We all are with you. We've all experienced that when we learn our types. But hold on, in the end, there's always positive with the Enneagram in moving forward, in expanding, in growing. It gives you steps, tools, exact patterns to follow in order to move forward and to feel good and to understand yourself better. So let's get started. Remembering that we will all understand pieces of this, will resonate with parts of these. But a Type 7 makes these, they'll check every box. They make an art form out of the Type 7, and that's the difference. Some famous Type 7s are Miley Cyrus, Russell Brand, Katy Perry, Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, Eddie Murphy, Peter Pan. That character is a Type 7. And if you can kind of see, when I imagine these people, they always kind of have a little side wink they're giving you, or they're very busy. Another one was Steven Spielberg. He might not be necessarily funny. That's kind of what we always think of them as, funny, but they're not necessarily funny, but they're very ambitious and on the go and busy and doing a million things at the same time. But yeah, there is sometimes a lot of that little sparkle in the eye, that little wink that they're giving you to the world. And they're amazing. Type 7s are amazing. And they're, because they teach us almost differently than what we think we're supposed to be. They're this ultimate childlike figure that we can all learn and we need to bring out within ourselves. Some things that may be described the Type 7 would be optimistic, enthusiastic, impulsive, adventurous, indulgent, spontaneous, positive, assertive, playful, and resilient. These Type 7s see life through a filter of optimism and positivity. They usually will look for bright sides of things. They are like explorers in the world, full of curiosity and wonder. And they're always on the lookout for the next exciting discovery or pursuit, or they're always in planning stage. There's always something to look forward to or to be in the plans. They know how to have fun, and they love spontaneity and adventure. These are imaginative people. They're very bold in some cases. They are able to know what it takes to get new ideas going. They're willing to be the ones that, I'll make the plans, let's do it. They kind of push everybody forward and actually make you go forward with the plan instead of just talking about it. They have lots of stories to tell, and they have, they're ready to share a story and kind of like, create an atmosphere of like fun and optimism and playfulness. So you might hear a Type 7 Enneagram say things like, I am an optimist. I can always find a silver lining. Or even in the midst of a trial or crisis, I know how to lighten the mood and cheer people up. Or I hate being bored. And if things get boring, I'm the one that's going to mix it up. They might say, sometimes I frustrate people by doing a rushed or haphazard job. They might say, it's hard for me to stay organized. They might say, spontaneity and freedom are important to me. They can make a quick decision. They might say, I can make a quick decision, but sometimes I'm too rash and hasty. I've been called shallow, flaky, goofy, but I just like to keep things lighthearted, right? Their key motivations, the things that motivate them to make the decisions they do. are to feel satisfied and content, to avoid pain and suffering, and to be taken care of. Their key fears are, I will feel empty or unhappy. They're really worried about that. They fear sadness will overwhelm me if I let it. They fear that they won't feel safe or stable. And the obstacles that kind of get in their way that kind of add to this are their emotional avoidance, their impulsivity, and maybe some overindulgence. The key obstacle for sevens is emotional avoidance. Driven by the fear of feeling empty, lonely, or overwhelmed by sadness, sevens avoid acknowledging the more negative and uncomfortable emotions in life. Instead, they fill themselves up with entertainment and distractions. This impulsive avoidance of negative emotions may lead to overindulgence and maybe a dismissal of other people's feelings and needs, because they don't want to feel the hard stuff, so they'll do what they got to do. And there's some people, type 4s, that's the hard stuff is what they're in all the time. And so sometimes a 7 will honor that that's what the 4 needs, and vice versa, right? These key fears of I will feel empty or unhappy. It's always in the problem where the solution lies in the Enneagram. So it's the fear of feeling unhappy that's the problem. It's not even the unhappy. So if a type 7 can sit with unhappiness for a minute and get used to sitting in that unhappiness, then that fear dispels. So it's the fear that's the problem, not the unhappiness. Does that make sense? Or sadness, another fear was letting sadness in. Same thing. If they can allow themselves to maybe practice recognizing when the sadness comes in, because that will be the case, is they might not even recognize the sadness is there, because as soon as it pops in, they've got something else in place to make that go away. So they got to slow down a little bit and take the time to actually feel the sadness and realize that that feeling isn't as difficult as they were afraid that it would be. For type 7s, in the course of their development, many 7s have had traumatic experiences which they did not feel equal to. In order to avoid the repetition of this pain in the future, they have evolved a double strategy. First, they repressed or whitewashed their negative and painful experiences. Many 7s paint their life story in positive colors, even when the scenario was everything but beautiful. Of course, we had difficulties too. Doesn't everybody, they might say, but you can't let it get you down. It's like, yeah, that was hard, but what am I going to do? Let it stop me? And now we all kind of do that. But this 7 is kind of doing that. It's in a reaction to their fear, or it's a reaction to get what they're motivated to get, right? So firstly, they kind of have whitewashed, or they've made it silver lined it, that kind of thing. Secondly, they've gone into their heads and begun to plan their lives so that every day will promise as much fun and as little pain as possible. So they've got something, and it's like, it might be hurting now, but I've got that going on in the future, so it's okay because I've got that ahead. I got something to look forward to, and that's kind of how they have done it, which, like I say, is a response to maybe some traumatic experiences that were overwhelming or that they did not feel equal to, is what Richard Rohr says. We all have these different traumatic experiences, and it's just, I don't know how we interact with them makes all the difference. It's a chicken and the egg. Do you have the 7 first and that's how you react, or do you have that experience and then you turn into a type 7 as a reaction to that? It's hard to say. But just kind of understanding some of the childhood experiences, I think, is important and something to just be aware of. Some considerations for growth for a type 7 are, when an uncomfortable feeling comes up that you'd rather ignore, pause and sit with it for a few minutes. Emotions are sometimes painful, but they are always temporary. Even the worst ones. This is something that type 7s haven't really bought into yet, but they do change on their own. You don't have to change them. They will move Nobody just stays sad forever and ever, ever. There's something else that comes in, even if it's another negative thing. Emotions are energy in motion. They are always moving. So she says in the book, Enneagram Empowerment, let yourself feel the emotions, because if you ignore your feelings, they will follow you around. But if you acknowledge them and accept them for what they are, you will feel as free as you would like. As you move forward, that's where your real freedom comes. And that's a big value for type 7 is freedom. So it kind of counterintuits to the 7 to kind of stop and feel it. But that's where the freedom will actually come in. Another piece of advice she gives to the type 7 is let the present moment fill you up. Use all 5 senses to practice observing the rich details of the here and now. So this is great advice because, you are looking for the silver lining. So just expand that out, or you're all looking for the optimistic thing. So just even expand that. Be like, in this moment, feel in your body what it feels like. Look at things around and what you see, smell, taste, touch. Just expand that a little bit more, and you'll even feel yourself filling with even more joy and more excitement. Instead of just letting life come at you, move into it, point it out, be deliberate with your experiences. Another consideration for growth, learn to be present with pain. When someone shares how they are struggling, refrain from trying to cheer them up or fix their problems. Instead, ask questions. A good one is, can you tell me more about that? And reflect back to them what they are saying. You feel really disappointed right now. Just ask and then literally repeat back. They will feel cared for, and you will learn that you are strong enough to move through pain instead of sidestepping it. I think this is one of the things in our society that we've kind of all taken on. It's like, how are you doing? And the answer is always fine, because we don't trust that we can have this exchange of, oh, I see that you're feeling that way, and then reflecting back and sitting in the pain together. So we just sidestep it by saying, fine, I'm fine. But I think it's a disservice. And I think that it causes disconnection, maybe not disconnection, but maybe just an opportunity for connection. We don't have to fix someone else's problems if they tell us the problem. They're not asking us to fix it. And if we just ask them about it, there's maybe thought in our mind that we're going to be stuck here for an hour listening. Maybe that's true in some cases, but I think it's only because they're starved for this kind of interaction. What if when somebody says, how are you doing today? You said, today's a rough day. And then the next person's reaction isn't like a responsibility to fix it, but to say, tell me more about that. So you're feeling this. Oh, I understand that. The end. There's no obligation to fix the problem. It's just sitting in it for a second together. That's like real connection. That's where meaning in life can really expand when we have those kind of moments. Another consideration for growth for a type 7 is when you can't stop consuming, whether that's food, experiences, distractions, etc., ask yourself what void you are trying to fill. If you can't stop reading about other people's lives, there might be pain in your own that you might be wanting to avoid. When you can't stop eating comfort food, you might have an emotion that needs to be comforted. Ask yourself what hunger you are really trying to feed. What are you hungry for? It's a great question. Her last consideration for growth is when it comes to the negatives in life, start saying and instead of but. Instead of saying, yes, that thing happened, but it's fine. Try and say, yes, that thing hurt a lot, and I know it will be okay. All of these things, I feel like I could have written this book. I have a big, huge and sign in my home to remind me of that very thing, that use and instead of but, or trying to make one exist and the other has to erase the other. Both can exist at the same time. We live in a world of paradox. And that lesson to me of learning how to live in paradox was life-changing. And that a lot of that happens with the word and. Most of things are and. Most experiences are full of joy, and there was a little bit of pain there. They didn't go perfectly. And so a lot of times what we do is when it doesn't turn perfect, if it wasn't perfect, then we categorize it as a failure, when we need to learn how to create both. Things didn't go perfectly and this part was great. Type 7s need to mindfully be aware of overindulgence or maybe some hastiness. Some ways that we can move through those as a type 7 when we feel overindulgent or when we have to make a decision and we feel like we got to hurry and make it, just that feeling of I got to hurry and decide. Take some time to acknowledge your emotions. Maybe do something nice for yourself. Take a hot shower or a cold shower, go for a walk, journal, maybe get some sleep, drink a glass of water, just pause in a way that serves you so that you don't just run forward with the tendency to overindulge or to make a decision quickly or too quickly. So again, the motivating fears are I will feel empty or unhappy. Sadness will overwhelm me if I let it in, and I won't feel safe and okay. Because those are our motivating fears, some examples of some thinking that might show up look like, I don't see the red flags about this person that my friends see. All I can see is the good stuff. So an alternative way of thinking is, I see many positive traits in this person, and I also see some negative traits. Both of these things are important to consider. There's the and again. You're never going to find this perfect person, but at least acknowledge that the negative's there. Just kind of push up against that part of you that just wants to oversweep it. Both can exist. Another example of a negative thinking might be, I have a really good feeling about it, so I don't think I need to be worried. A different kind of thought might be, I feel optimistic about this, but this is a feeling. There are also facts that I should take into consideration and give equal value to. What I think is so interesting about the Enneagram is, I think like a type 5, maybe a type 1, they're going to look at this and they're going to have the exact opposite. They're going to say, look at the facts. Like, just look at the facts. When I make a decision about whether I like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream, what are the facts? They're almost going to be too much into the facts versus their feeling. That's an emotional decision. What your favorite ice cream is an emotional decision. It's not a factual decision. And so those types are going to need almost the opposite, right? So it's not like this rule is for everybody. That's what's so great about the Enneagram is, depends on who you're talking to, you might have the exact opposite advice for that person. But for the type 7, they might go with how it's not even how it feels. It's just if it doesn't disrupt, or they're just going to try, and it's the easy way or the way that's the least bumpy, the least difficult. They're looking for that. That's just a motivation for them. So they might oversee some things and because it's just the easier way. So they're going to need some time to look at some facts and to really center and bring and ground themselves in some facts or some logic. And lastly, they might have an empowered thinking, or a negative thinking example might say, sure, I feel sad if I think about it, but this is so small in the big scheme of things. There's so much of life to be enjoyed. An empowered thinking might be, in the near future, I will go back to enjoying my life, but at this moment, I feel sad. This is a big deal to me, and this moment is important. I think that is so great because you never just, the 7 has the type to just move from the one side to the other. So it's like, I loved how she added, look, I'll go back to being joyful in a minute. We're going to let that exist, let that authentic part of the 7 exist, that's where they're going to want to go and be joyful. And we're also just going to acknowledge this for a minute, acknowledge the hard time for a minute. But we're not trying to erase what's the nature and gift of a type 7. As just a reminder, in the show notes, I always add a link to a list of values. And I think it's important to have these values of yours in your possession as well as your type, because what's valuable to you is also important. It kind of adds another layer of information to you and makes things a little more personalized. So look at the list of all the different values, circle 10 or so that kind of ring true, and then try and narrow it down to 2 or 3. These are your values, and so decisions will be influenced by your particular values. And that's an important part to play, because even 2 type 7s might make different decisions or come to a situation differently based on their values. And it's important to allow yourself to be yourself. That brings us to some self-care for type 7s. So for the heart, or for the emotional part of a type 7, find a meditative hobby that will allow you to keep busy with your hands, like weaving, knitting, gardening, coloring, or throwing pottery. Instead of just sitting there in the quiet and being still, that might not work for you, type 7. So find things that, like on a bike ride, where your body's busy, but it allows your mind to kind of settle down a little bit. Let the thoughts come. Don't fight the thoughts in a meditation. I think it's important to not always don't just say, I shouldn't have these thoughts. Let them just kind of settle down on their own, and they will. You go for a bike ride with no sound, your thoughts you're gonna be thinking this, and this, but after a while they settle down, and they might not just turn to nothingness, but all of a sudden just maybe one idea will take root, and then you'll just kind of pile through that and find a solution to that one thought. In the Wholeness Network library, type 7s, you will love the visual meditations. So you don't have to sit there. You don't even have to close your eyes. You just stare at the screen. There's music, there's scenery. Sometimes there's words, like affirmation words or words, those kind of things. But those visual meditations are going to be amazing for you. They're short, for one. You're not there a long time. It's like a way of calming down without having to shut everything off. Another self-care is to have an interpretive dance party in your room. Turn on a song that matches your current emotions, so you have to figure out what that is. And I think that's important. Sometimes maybe it's a slow, bittersweet song, and other times maybe it's hyper exciting fun. So the first step is to realize what your emotions are, and then start moving your body as if you were acting out the feelings. That's a great self-care. Another emotional self-care is to watch a movie that represents a painful feeling in your life right now. If you are sensing some loss, Marley and Me, unless it was a pet that was your loss, maybe that's too much, but it's going to let those emotions express on their own, and you won't have to, and they can be toward the movie instead of maybe about some kind of other loss. But that's a great advice. For your body, type 7s, pay attention to all 5 of your senses and what you're experiencing at the present moment. Also, use exercise as a way to finding rest. Let it release you from the busyness of your mind and pull down into the gravity of your body. This is fascinating, right? So other types, again, we're going to have the opposite, but this is like you to relax. You to self-care is to move and be active. Where to, again, a type 4, maybe a type 2 even, that is not a calming, grounding thing. That's like really busy. But to exercise is almost grounding to you. It's being in your body. It's letting it be active. I love the way the Enneagram supports and honors individuals. The last way for the body to receive self-care is find new and exciting ways to eat fruits and vegetables. Go on an exploration for the most delicious and interesting toppings. Your health doesn't have to be separate from the fun part of your life. In my weight loss class on michelleingle.com, that's one of the whole weeks is to pick a new vegetable or a fruit, something from the produce every day that week, just to see what there is, just to kind of have fun with it. Because sometimes eating healthy foods is like drudgery for people. And so this is a way to just explore. That's a very type 7 activity that I've included there. For your mind, type 7s, practice being by yourself in quietness without distractions or entertainment. Start in small increments if this is difficult for you. 2 minutes is not too small to start if that's all you can do. 2 minutes of silence and stillness. That is a big check mark on the list of that self-care hint to me for you type 7s. And then you can increase it as you go. Another mind one is learn the details behind the everyday miracles in your life and reflect on them throughout the day. Practice observing the details, and you will gradually find it easier to be content in the present. Type 7s just kind of move through things quick. They're on to the next. And so this is just one way to say, again, like opening it up we talked about before. Open up and look at all that was there. Take just one more minute to really take it all in. The joy, the excitement, all the stuff, those words that speak to you. Just open it up a little bit more. And your last self-care for the mind is print out a list of emotion words and keep it handy to help you name and acknowledge your true emotions throughout the day. In the library, we have several of those, but one's really great because most of them are negative. This one's mostly just for negative emotions. When I'm having a hard time and I just feel it, I'm just feeling it. And sometimes I don't know what that it is. When I look at this list, I can go, oh, it's that. And it's kind of categorized because some emotions, there's a mix. It's like fear, anger, and grief are kind of like the cores, the core negative quote emotions. And so when I find, oh, I'm that, I don't have the list in front of me, but then it shows me that there's just a little bit of anger there and there's a little bit of fear, or there's a lot of fear in that, but there's a little bit of anger or grief or whatever. And I can kind of it helps me go even one layer deeper where I'm like, okay, what am I angry about? And what am I fearful about or whatever? And just allowing those to be true. And again, same thing that we talked about before. We don't have to fix it. It's like, I'm angry about that. And then especially for type 7, they're going to be like, well, then I need to get rid of that. I need to stop that. Not so. Emotions are there to counteract and bring balance to the good. I've kind of talked about it with, if I've colored with like crayons, right? The beautiful picture. Sometimes if I outline the different areas with black, it just pops. And so sometimes the negative emotions kind of do that. They accentuate, they don't take away from the beauty. And that's kind of not how a type 7 will think. They're going to think, no, the black's going to take over, or the black's going to be what I look at. And it doesn't. Sometimes those negative things or those uncomfortable things actually accentuate. They're there to accentuate the positive. They actually make the positive even more positive. They give you more of what you're looking for. So trust that. Like, it might feel so strange. It might be like jumping off a cliff at first and having a little bit of blind faith that it's going to work. But if you kind of work with those negative emotions and feel them for a bit, it will only strengthen your ability to have fun, to be energetic, to move forward and grow. The wings of a type 7 are 6, the loyalist, and 8, the challenger. When the enthusiast is in balance, they're going to have, they're going to be able to be bold towards someone but also be loyal to that person. They'll have a really good balance in communicating a way that serves their own needs, but the other person doesn't feel like they're against the other person. With that loyalist and challenger balanced wings, they may look to the 6 to look out for the group and not just themselves. And then they might look to the 8 to also look for the underdog and not just themselves. The 7s might need a little help with both of those things. They don't have that, but their wings are perfectly placed to support them with that. So 6 is with the group and 8 is with the underdog. The 8s are looking out for the underdog. When the type 7 might be living or acting, it might be a moment at a time. Maybe it's weeks at a time. When they're in their egoic state, they may look like they're desperate to quell their anxieties. They might be impulsive. They might maybe even look a little out of control. Their mood swings might change quickly. They might be completely exhausted and just not themselves. They might even give up and have a deep depression or despair. They might be really impulsive. Like I say, that might be minutes of time. That might be days of time. Hopefully that's not the way that one is living all the time. But when we look at what's actually going on, we can look at the Enneagram and it gives us clues. Usually It's the very thing we're struggling with that has the key. It's our vice and our virtue always really exist in the same place. So if we are depressed, let's see, a type 7 is feeling depression, then maybe it's time to decompress, to stop, to slow down and do exactly what it's telling you to do. It's exactly the clue is right in the problem. The virtue and vice are always there. A type 7 is living just kind of on autopilot when they're not really just going through the motions. They might look maybe self-centered or materialistic. They might tell lots of stories and want to be the center of attention. They might be really, really busy all the time, or they might kind of know what's the popular thing, and they know all the brands that are important, what popular persons in the news right now. They might be overly obsessed with those kind of stories. There's like that restlessness to them. They are always just looking for the new thing. It's like if you're talking with a friend and they're just like always talking about the plans ahead of time, they might be a type 7 on autopilot. And it's like they just need to come back to center. But once they have matured and really expanded on their gifts as the type 7 and explored the ways to open up maybe those key fears and really pay attention to the motivations and see if they're equal to what they are influencing in your life, then we can become to an enlightened type 7. And at this way, they become really accomplished achievers. They can be practical and productive. They can be, they're called the enthusiast, so they can actually start to enthuse other people and be very motivated to even other people, not just themselves. They can be awed by simple wonders of life, and they can help others feel the goodness and awe and wonder of the universe. The type 7 under stress might look like a type 1, the reformer. They might get all of a sudden very rigid. Their opinions are really strong. They become, they call out people maybe a little bit, which for a type 1, that's their authenticity, but it'll just feel off when the 7 starts doing it. And if you recognize that in somebody, you can say, oh, they're a little stressed. And for the 7 to move into balance and stability, they're going to look to the type 5. And again, the type 5 is the investigator. What's going on? Let's figure this out. What's logically going to happen? Let's disconnect from whatever's happening right now and just look at the facts for a minute. And that's going to bring the 7, like, okay, that's what's going on. That's why I'm stressed, and bring us kind of back to center. So the type 7 in relationship to the type 1 is interesting because, first of all, the 1 is looking to the 7 for their stress relief, and the 7 is looking at the 1 when they act stressful. When they are stressful, they act like the type 1. For 7 and the type 2, the helper kind of wants to help out. The type 2 might feel and see the negatives in the type 2's life and like, oh, that's hard. When the type 7's like, what? There's nothing wrong. It's fine. And so there might be some clash there a little bit because the 2 is going to feel or understand the things that the type 7 is just not noticing, just moving past quickly. The 7 and the 3, they could achieve great things together. It's going to be fun achievement, though. The 7's, it's going to be adventurous. It's going to be more like, backpacking tours or, very adventurous type things, maybe not business suit type adventure, or achievement. The 7 and the 4 are, a little bit of opposites. Still a little bit of opposites as far as one's very more extroverted, the other's a little introverted. The 8 and the 4 are the most opposite they're the ones that really do have an opposite. 4 is feminine energy or yin energy. 8 is masculine or yang energy. And it sets the 7's right next to that. It's got a little bit of that too. So they're just opposites, and it's important to recognize that the strengths and weaknesses in each other between the 4 and the 7. Again, the 7 and the 5, that's where we look for stress relief. The 5's also turning into the 7 when they are under stress. So that's a dynamic to be aware of. The 7 and the 6, there's the wing, the loyalist. The 7's going to be loyal to themselves, and the 6 is going to be loyal to the crowd. And so there's something to learn from each other. Because they're wings of each other, they have something that can really support the other. And same with the 7 and the 8. With those wings, the challenger, the headstrong, move forward. They're going to get, if they lean more onto their 8, who's headstrong, fast movement, they might have a tendency to make decisions too quickly. A 7-8 might be something that really shows up as we're just going to make decision, quick, move fast. Just a lot of movement. And that sometimes that's called for. Sometimes we need to bring in that 6 and even that 5 where we go to for logic and kind of balance that out. And 7 and 9 are similar. They're optimistic. They're going to get along. They're going to, 9s get along with everybody, but 7s and 9s are kind of like sister brothers. They've got a lot of the same energies. The 7 is still part of the thinking. So what's interesting is, remember, the 5's the investigator, 6, they kind of almost, they have a double hit of thinking. So they get into their mind and have a lot of fear and anxiety. And then the 7, it's kind of like they don't want to think. They just want to move forward. They kind of resist their thinking, or they're thinking ahead, or, they don't reflect back, or they don't reflect in the present moment sometimes. So that's the thinking. And fear is that trying. They're still in that fear. Their fear of needing to be too responsible. The type 7, they don't want to be too responsible. They don't want to be bored. They want to have fun. They can't. That's what they live for, is fun. And where would we be without you 7s that help remind us of that fun? For me, a type 2, it's not my first strength. So when a 7 comes in and they start telling the joke or whatever, it makes me feel good. It gives me perspective when they bring me into spontaneity, which is something that's not one of my go-tos, right? But spontaneity is really important in humans to have that every once in a while. Surprise, excitement. And so we appreciate you type 7s for teaching us that, to be the enthusiasts in our lives. So we will see you next time with type 8, the challenger. We invite you to the wholenessnetwork.com, where you'll find the Wholeness Library. Inside, you'll find tutorials, downloads, mini classes, and all sorts of streaming content for you on your wholeness journey.